The first breakout we'll be talking about is the general session led by the wonderful Chad. We were talking about the topic of burnout and how to identify it, what we can do to improve that overall health and productivity. And this is something that's really relevant because a lot of us are now all day, sometimes all night on a Zoom meeting, available and accessible. And it's not just your work hours. And we're joined by two great guests, but I'll let Chad take it away.
The conversation really did knock it out of the park. So big thank you to Brent and Darcy, because your insight on burnout, which almost all of us hard workers who are really grinding it for our own companies, ourselves, and for CPC, are probably experiencing, and in the words of the Brent brought up, racing towards burnout. We may not be there yet, but we're racing towards it. It was really nice to hear about the symptoms that we can recognize in ourselves, the symptoms that we can recognize in others, what we can do for ourselves, and how the teams and organizations that we work with can help identify and prevent burnout, so we can all kick ass and be better at what we do. So that's why you should watch it. I got involved with CPC because I work for Plexxis Software, which builds technology for subcontractors. But I ended up moderating these mental health sessions because of my former experience as a police officer and working in crisis resolution, and I had a career in wrestling and mixed martial arts, which led me into teaching performance during chaos and critical stress. So that's how this marriage occurred. And at first, it seems odd that mental health, that we're marrying mental health with construction technology, but because the brain really controls everything that we do, it's at the center of everything that we do. Prioritizing the brain in construction is just going to lead to us building better, being better at enjoying what we build, and being happier in the process. So it's a win-win all around. We've decided to prioritize mental health in these roundtables in order to normalize the conversations and really help organizations understand why they need to improve, why they need to prioritize mental health at their own organizations. So on that note, this session is about a burnout. I am honored to introduce our experts, Darcy Gruttadaro. And where's Brent here? Brent, okay, I see you there. Now, Brent, how do I start with Brent? Brent is a best-selling author, and we would say he's an authority on emotional intelligence, and he's really dedicated his life to helping companies kind of tap into the soft skills and prioritize mental health. His efforts really help companies see the business case for prioritizing these soft skills and why they should prioritize mental health. And as I was doing my research on him, there was a really important note that I saw in one of the videos that he did, and it was pretty impressive. He grew up in the 1968 Georgia Jim Crow era of segregation, and while that is obviously a very unfortunate time for us as humans, there's a lot of benefits that come with being a part of that shared experience that we can all benefit from now. And he has some great stories around that time and how those unfortunate experiences do offer the great insights that we can all benefit from. So one of the stories that was really cool was that he was actually on the first integrated Little League football team. So when I say that he was a part of that shared experience, he was literally in the middle of it. And I think his experience in emotional intelligence, diversity and inclusion is really going to shine through here in the discussion today. So we're all going to benefit immensely of it, from his experience. Now, Darcy is the director at the Center for Workplace Mental Health at the American Psychiatric Foundation. She is a nationally recognized expert with who works with businesses in diverse industries to raise mental health awareness. She helps create mentally healthy organizational cultures and develop strategies to improve access to mental health care. So Darcy spends a lot of time working with her team to create high impact training courses, case studies, and resources for both employers and workers to help them address workplace mental health. So I am honored that you two have joined us to help shed some light on burnout, which is a real condition that is only being exacerbated by the current working conditions that COVID's put on us.
To your point on the numbers, though, I'm just looking at our breakouts here. It's second highest attendance rate here in this breakout. So it's awesome that. Well, I mean, it's not awesome that we're all facing burnout, because I know that's why I'm here. But it is awesome that we're here talking about it and want to do something about it.
That's the thing. It is about maintaining this pace and cadence on the discussions on mental health. I mean, even if it takes years, just having these conversations is going to normalize the conversation, which is going to help in the prioritization of mental health, which is going to benefit everyone. We already know that. So this is great. Okay, so on that note, let's jump into things. A lot of the topics that we talk about have titles that have become buzzwords, but burnout is not one of them. It is a legitimate syndrome. And that's why I'm really happy that Darcy is here to help us explain it. So Darcy.
What a great group. And I think any of these people probably could have presented this topic. So wow, it's really humbling to be here talking with all of you. And, I think mental health is a big topic right now, frankly, and burnout, it has a connection to it. So I'm really so happy that you're here talking about this. Mental health, we've seen a tripling and quadrupling of what people are experiencing. So, and burnout, as I said, is related. So I'm just going to share a little bit about the definition and then talk a little bit about some of the reasons that people experience burnout, and then what employers and employees can do. So there's actually a formal definition for burnout, and this came about it was actually released in May of 2019. The World Health Organization decided that they should define it because it was such a worrisome phenomenon that was going on around the world, frankly. So they defined it as a syndrome that results from chronic workplace stress. Not surprising. I think stress is really the operative word there, that is not successfully managed. And I don't love that part of it because I think that really puts the burden on the individual. Whereas I think, having read a fair amount about it, I think it's a shared responsibility between the organization that someone works for and the individual themselves. But anyway, it does have 3 dimensions that are associated with it. So when it comes to burnout and this chronic stress, it is really about feeling depleted or emotionally exhausted. It's about creating increased mental distance between, from one's job on the part of an individual, or feeling really negative or cynical about your job, and then reduced professional effectiveness. So in other words, you're just not performing at the level that you are capable of. And again, as I said, this was officially recognized by the World Health Organization in May of 2019, and it was a big media splash when that came out. The ICD is the International Classification of Disease, which is the classification that the World Health Organization puts out. They did come out and say it's not a medical condition, it's really a phenomenon. So, it's worrisome enough that it really got their attention. And if you go to the next slide, I wanted to make a comment about stress, because as it turns out, stress is not all a bad thing. And really, when it comes to performance, our stress level, if we have some, manageable amount of stress, it means we are likely performing at a higher level. So, you don't want to be at that lame, inactive, and bored stage. You want to have a little bit of healthy tension so that you're focused and motivated. But you can see from this bell curve that as soon as you kind of hit that peak and go on to the other side, you start to see that people really get physically ill from too much stress. And this is where burnout really comes around, because people are exhausted, they're really overloaded, and mental health conditions come up. This is the connection. So there's burnout and there can be breakdown. It's really, this is when it gets really quite worrisome. But I did want to just really stress the fact that, a little bit of stress is not a bad thing. It actually, and I think we all know that sometimes when you're stressed, you perform better because you kind of put more emphasis and you do a little bit of a better job. So if you go to the next slide, I just want to share the Gallup, the National Gallup Group did, I know there's a lot of words on this slide, I apologize. I wanted to keep it to 3. They did a national survey. So on the far left, the top 5 reasons that employees experience burnout are unfair treatment, too much work, not surprisingly at all, lack of role clarity. So not really sure, like, what am I supposed to be doing and when am I supposed to be doing it? And then 4 is lack of communication and support. And 5 is unreasonable time pressure. And then when we really think about what can employers do versus what can employees do, and again, there's really a role for both, but I really cringe at the thought that we're just going to look at employees and say, like, suck it up, figure it out, because there is a lot employers can do. So they can make well-being part of their organizational culture. That is like work-life balance and people taking personal time off. Right now, what we know is people are not taking time off, and it's really worrisome because you got to take a break. Also, managers can be equipped to help prevent burnout. One thing is for managers to understand it. So again, sharing that description, sharing a little bit about stress and how it can cross over to being unhealthy. And of course, making it safe to talk so that people don't feel like I'll get fired if I talk about how stressed out I am and I'll lose my, position on the team, and also being fair and avoiding micromanaging. Because the command and control can be the way some managers really manage their team, but it doesn't really work great when it comes to performance and productivity and stress. Also, setting clear expectations. This really goes to the role, making sure everybody understands what they're supposed to be doing. And then focusing on improving the employee experience. If people are not enjoying the work with you, they're going to move on. And usually it's the high performers who know they have other options. So that's important to keep in mind too.
Hey, Darcy.
Yeah.
The that point, focusing on improving employee experience. Can you think of any examples of that? Like, just when I read that and I listened to you talk, like my mind went in 1,000 different directions. Everything from flexibility or social interactions, or the difference between working at home and working at the office, and how you can create those experiences. What type of things have you seen or heard?
Yeah, so those are all great examples. We've been hearing about employers giving people a surprise day off. It's Friday. We're gonna, on Thursday, we're gonna announce, hey, nobody's working tomorrow. I realize that can be tricky with deadlines and so forth, but that's one option. The flexibility is huge. Sometimes just sending something to employees so they get a surprise in the mail if they're working remotely. So we've heard of people getting ice cream, people getting, just fun little surprises that they weren't expecting. Yes, ice cream can travel through the mail with dry ice. So, there's all kinds of little perks that people can get, offering new digital options. Like some people are getting Calm, some people are getting Headspace for a 1-year, no cost opportunity to understand meditation better, things like that. Just little perks that are unexpected, but also the interaction piece, like scheduling a social hour during the workday, maybe late at 4 o'clock, saying we're all going to kick off at 4, we're going to come together. our team did an online game. It was a total blast. It was sort of like timed Hangman. We had a great time and it was a great bonding experience and we all got an extra hour off. So just little things like that go a long way.
Awesome.
Yeah. So then when you think about sort of what can employees do, I mean, obviously talking with your supervisor or manager, but again, people can feel threatened by that because their supervisor or manager may not take kindly to that. So you got to kind of gauge your options there. Consider options working at other places. I mean, if you're a high flyer, that is going to be a big loss to an organization, but you probably have options. So you have to decide, is this more than I can handle? And is it really impacting my health? And then seek support from others, family, friends, coworkers. The more you talk about something, the more it lessens the intensity that it's having on you. It sort of eases the burden on your mind and body. Get exercise. You know, it's not easy now. Even taking a walk, you get a fresh perspective. Engage in stuff you like and relaxing activity. Maybe, you know, I don't know, throw pots or garden or whatever it is you do. Go for a walk with friends. But just also to remind yourself that it gets better. We're not going to be in this forever. Now, it may not get better if the workplace hasn't changed at all for you and your burnout is high. But these are just sort of, they're kind of logical things you can do. But I would say from an employer perspective, the return on investment is high. I mean, you're going to have lower absence. People are going to call in and not show up if they're not happy with the work environment. You're going to have higher absenteeism. You're going to have, you're going to have high turnover. So you want to have lower turnover by really addressing burnout. Mm-hmm. Also, healthcare costs. You're going to have people that experience physical ailments associated with burnout. Stress definitely produces higher blood pressure, heart conditions, all kinds of healthcare issues that can be costly to the workplace. Plus, you're going to have higher productivity and performance. I mean, even the worst jobs in the world, if people have good coworkers, a non-toxic boss, and have some fun at work, they'll still really perform and show up and do a good job for you. So it's really key to understand how powerful it is. And I think employers really understand now, showing that you care for your employees makes a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. All good information on the ROI.
Yeah.
I mentioned this last time, and it's an important statistic. There was a great book called The Culture Code, and it brought up a statistic on organizations that focus on the attributes of the highest performing teams, which were all centered around culture. Almost all of these attributes were attributes that culture was at the core, the human interaction, paying attention to one another, having eyes and ears for each other, giving each other the attention. And a lot of things that you just mentioned here were a part of those attributes. And they, in the short term, they came at a high cost. But in the long term, over 10 years, they studied 200 companies with that fostered these attributes. And over 10 years, they saw a 756% increase of net profit over competing organizations that did not put these attributes at the core of their practices. So 756% increase in net profit is a pretty significant ROI.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'll add to that is if anyone's read the Aristotle project that Google did around understanding how to really, they sort of looked at what are the most effective elements in team interaction. And the number one issue was people feeling psychologically safe to talk to one another and share and be open and, really express when they had concerns. And it was amazing. Psychological safety was the number one issue when it came to highest performance with teams. So it was a cool project, and it really goes to the importance of open communication and a willingness to hear from employees, even when you don't like what they have to say.
Yeah, and which starts with the leaders being open and transparent and vulnerable themselves.
Yep.
Awesome. Darcy, thank you. I've taken a whole bunch of notes that I think we're going to open up on the discussion here. But first, I want to get to Brent now. And Brent, we stress that putting the mind first really enables us to achieve a high level, or enables us to achieve that peak level of performance. But sometimes we can push and persevere so hard that we're actually contributing to burnout in an effort to prevent it. And I believe with your experience, you have a lot to offer here. What are some of the symptoms that we can recognize not only in ourselves but in others that'll help aid in both our understanding and prevention?
Well, we use an emotional intelligence test as well as a physical symptom survey test to just check in and see what's happening physically and emotionally. Do you want to see an example of burnout in the test? So this is a great example of somebody in burnout. This is a bell curve distribution test, just like an IQ test. So 100 is the mean. So you're down in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. That's way, way below average. You can see on the red, which is the before. This guy was in total burnout. Now we look at 6 main areas to check for burnout. We look at self-regard, because usually when you're in burnout, you eat crappy food and you don't get sleep and you gain some weight and you're feeling bad about yourself. And then we look at relationship skills, because usually we don't have the energy to create and maintain good relationships, which is a big part of mental health. Also, self-actualization. Are you using your talents to the best of your ability? Do you feel fulfilled in your life and work? And then we look at stress tolerance, of course, and then optimism and happiness. And all of those were his lowest, those 6. So we started on him working on self-care and being better with himself. And you could see that the deltas are just incredible, because the statisticians tell me a 5-point delta indicates a shift in behavior, and he's got 30, 40-point deltas here. So this is a totally different human being. And I'll just run this quick video of him.
So it was very stressful, a lot of long hours, a lot of unhappy people.
Yeah, and you were one of those unhappy people.
That's correct.
And how did that affect your personal life and what was going on there as well?
Personal life wasn't much of a personal life, because you're home long enough to eat and go to bed and sleep. So there was no time for family. There was no time for your wife. There was no other time except work.
So you weren't taking care of yourself either?
No, not at all.
What was your initial reaction to the program when you were going to be in this program, and you know, what was your initial reaction to that?
My initial reaction was, what was I doing here? That this was, I had a job that had to be done that was already behind, trying to get it caught up, and I'm in this class and I don't understand why that I'm in this class and what good's this class actually going to do. I think that anybody who ever knew me before and saw me now would know the difference in between the way I was then and the way that I am now. So this guy was smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. He was in horrible shape. He improved it. He worked on his emotional part of this as well as the physical part. He did quit smoking. Now we have seen something we call racing toward burnout, when we get a really good, nice, balanced emotional profile, and it doesn't indicate burnout, but then the person will walk in for a coaching session and they'll have bags under their eyes and they'll be 40 pounds overweight and they'll be exhausted. And we call that racing toward burnout, because emotionally you're able to handle that stress. But what happens is those symptoms of stress show up in your physical body. So things like fatigue, being exhausted all the time, trouble sleeping, wake up and can't go back to sleep or can't fall asleep, aches and pains, headaches, tension headaches, aches and pains in your body, any kind of autoimmune things that kick in, stomach issues, because when you're in this low level fight or flight and adrenaline's pumping all the time to keep you going, it takes the blood flow away from the internal organs, so you can't digest your food well. All of those are physical symptoms of stress. So if you've got a bunch of those, you're probably in burnout, or at least flirting with burnout. So then we have to address both. So we talk about the emotional stuff and emotional intelligence, but we also talk a lot about stress and how to manage that.
nutrition, sleep, exercise. I'm a certified yoga instructor. I teach meditation and mindfulness techniques to help people with these issues. So it's something that, number one, that's what Dennis said to me. He goes, this showed me there was a problem, and then gave me some tools to be able to work my way out of the problem. If we don't have the discussion, we don't know there's a problem. That's the biggest issue. People just push and push and push, and the adrenaline kicks in, and they just go until they collapse in some way. That's what we got to stop. We got to start having these discussions and checking in with each other.
So those symptoms, those are things that you can do a self-assessment, recognize the symptoms in yourself, and do something about them. Now, one of the problems that we have in the construction industry is, the tough guy attitude, right? Where even if you recognize the symptoms, you're still going to overlook them and you're still going to push through. So as good teammates, two questions for you. How do we recognize the symptoms in others? And if we do, how do we approach people to talk about it?
Right. Well, I think it's about having a culture of caring about other people and helping them. And if you see these things, try to have those discussions. But I look at it as performance. Like, everybody wants to perform well. So if this is about peak mental, physical, and emotional performance, and training them like athletes and letting them know that this could affect things like safety. I mean, think about, you're exhausted. I give this example. A guy's, hung over a little bit. He wakes up late. He's pissed off at the world. He races to work. He has a fight with his spouse. He's in financial difficulty. He gets there. He slams a couple of Red Bulls, takes some NyQuil or Dayquil, grabs a few donuts, and that's your crane operator. Well, about an hour later, that guy's going to be in a coma. Mm-hmm. His blood sugar is going to bottom out. He's exhausted. He's not in the optimum level of performance. He could hurt somebody. He could kill somebody. So we talk about it as kind of like corporate athletes, and that seems to appeal to these guys. And like, for instance, there's a breathing technique that I use that's thousands of years old. It's a pranayama. It's a yoga breathing technique, but the Navy SEALs use it. Mm-hmm. So they use this breathing technique. And so when they're storming a compound, they have to keep their vitals under control, their heart rate down, their adrenaline down, or they can't think clearly. So they use this breathing technique to stay calm. Mm-hmm. So I tell them, we're going to breathe like Navy SEALs today. So you kind of have to introduce it however they can accept it, and meet them where they are and let them know, I know this isn't for everybody, but try it, see what you think. If it helps, keep doing it. If it doesn't, don't do it.
So this is a, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's when you mentioned culture of care, this is a long transition. This isn't something that happens overnight. And it happens with not one person, but a group of people, kind of almost a critical mass of people impacting the culture. So would you have any tips then to get this started in an organization for those people who want to see this happen, believe their organization can achieve this culture of care, but it's not there yet?
Well, I offer this free emotional intelligence test, which you have and Nathan has, and everybody can do that. That's a good start. Take that, and it has a physical symptom survey with it as well. And if you can get your folks to take that and then have a discussion on the results. See, if I'm in a group and we've taken this little test, I'll say, how many of you where burnout showed up one of the top 3 profiles? And raise your hand, and let's talk about that, and see what's the root cause of that burnout, and tell us what's going on. And then maybe they don't open up right away, but the more you talk about it, the more people feel like they have permission to discuss it. It helps to talk about it yourself. I have a family history of anxiety and depression, and it's hard sometimes, especially during this COVID thing. And I'm a very much of an extrovert, and I haven't gotten my people fix, and it's been hard. So you have to open yourself up first, and then I found that people are so starved for this discussion that as soon as it becomes, acceptable and permissible to talk about, they are all over it, and they really want to talk about this. So you got to give them permission to talk about it.
Interesting. Okay, give me an idea here. John Marsh, you mind if I put you on the spot?
Yeah, I'm Jonathan Marsh. I am a construction dork, and I'm also a CEO of Steel Toe Consulting. And I joined the room because this month I counted, and I lost an employee. My clients have lost in total 15 employees. And it's February, so February is the month that people jump around. It's not a good month, but almost all of them you can write down to culture or mental health. Like none of them were, hey, I'm going to get my dream job. All of them were one of those two things. And I said, if I can count my clients and myself, this is probably something I should take a look at.
Awesome. And the whole reason that you're here is because you want to start spearheading something that is going to have an impact on your culture. So what you've heard already, A, before coming here, did you have any plans on how you were going to do it? And B, after listening to what you have, has it impacted your plans?
So before I came here, I actually got to meet a guy named Kyle Holmes at Brent Company, who's another contractor in downtown Irvington, Texas. And Brent had this really cool program that they called industrial counseling. And what they did is whenever there was a job transition, they would have you sit down with the counselor for a little while, because when you're transitioning to a new job, a lot of what you guys said that causes burnout, those things go along with having a new transitional experience. And so what I was thinking when I looked at all of the 15 people that sort of left work or quit or jumped jobs, is I thought, if you had someone to do a little transitional counseling, to sit down with you and do exactly what Brent and Darcy are kind of getting at, and do a self-assessment, start looking at what are the real problems, I think a lot of them would have stayed. And the worst part, I think a lot of them took the problems that they have at the first job that they're at now, they just moved to the next job, and now they're really in a new position. So it's probably going to be worse. So I think that I actually wrote down a ton of stuff while you were writing. Like when I worked at William T. Spader Company, we actually did yoga for soft tissue injuries. So that was our excuse. The guy who ran it was the head of our head mechanic, who was short, overweight, and had a horrible sense of humor. So by the time you left, everybody was laughing, and everybody had some basic yoga, and everybody had some basic breathing. And we brought down soft tissue injury, and we brought down all those things. So I think those are the two things that like, I think I had a couple questions for Brent and for Darcy, if you guys can answer. So my concern is in talking to some of these, I talked to a lot of the 15 people, and they're not all from one company. This is 4 different companies. It's just 15 total. When people are in burnout mode, you had talked about racing towards burnout, Brent, and what is the recovery time really? Because I felt like all of them are like, yeah, I'm doing good. And it's like 2 weeks. And I'm like, it's only been 2 weeks. And so what's a real schedule for somebody that's got some of those low scores like you showed, Brent, to show actual recovery that's going to be sustainable for any amount of time? Because I feel like they get to the point where they have some cool coping skills, and then they roller coaster down.
That's there's so many variables with age and pre-existing kind of conditions and whatever you've got. But I'd say the common things are nutrition and sleep and stress and exercise and those things. So I think it's more about creating that culture around that. For instance, if I was on a project right now, there would be no brake trucks, no crap brake trucks. There would be good gourmet food brake trucks. There wouldn't be frozen burritos and crap food and Monster energy drinks. I would say, get that stuff off my project. Let's create a culture where we don't bring donuts and crap food into the meetings. Let's have some nice food and some good bars with some protein in them and some fruit, So I think it's about more creating the culture, but the timeline is going to be so different for each individual. Some people are going to be coming back from a lot of stuff, and they may have even developed some autoimmune responses and diseases. Those are going to take months and years probably to overcome. But if you're just experiencing those physical symptoms of stress and you really do all this stuff, you really get your sleep and you really do manage your stress and do some meditation or some kind of, quiet time every day, and you do eat well, that recovery time can be weeks and maybe a few months and not 6 months to a year. But again, there's so many different variables, but I think it's about creating that culture around that and saying, this is important. It astounds me that we put people on projects, high stress, and they eat crap food and they don't get sleep and they don't exercise and they don't do anything they know to be good for them. And then we expect them to perform at a high level. That's insanity. And they do perform at a high level and they finish those projects, but it comes at a great cost. We have the second highest suicide rate of any industry. This is insane what we're doing to ourselves.
Mm-hmm. You had a question for Darcy too there, John?
Well, it was either, can you want to weigh in on that too? And you really covered the physical side, but what about like the cognitive side? Because I can see when someone gains weight, and I can see when somebody's not taking care of themselves. I mean, it's tougher now because everybody's hair's gone, but before it was easy to see. But like from like a behavioral or what kind of housekeeping should we be doing there? I totally agree, Brent. And I say that as somebody who ate a burger from McDonald's for lunch. but
Darcy, I think this is yours. I think you're much more qualified to answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, I think, in terms of how long does it take to, I just wanted to say, I think we're all unique human beings. And I think it's a lifestyle change. And that's the thing that's really important, is making sure that organizations realize it's a culture shift. So it's not like, okay, you got 2 months and then you're better. It's a real culture shift. And the other thing is, a good manager will kind of check in and just make sure, like, do you have what you need? I want to make sure I'm supporting you and that kind of thing. But then also, I mean, stress and burnout have an absolute impact on your brain and your brain functioning, and depression, which is connected to stress. When you have excessive levels of stress and depression has a real cognitive impact. Difficulty making decisions, difficulty processing information in your brain. So you're right to ask the question of, like, does this cross over? And how do you know that? I mean, that's the other thing. The thing we just created this people manager training, and what we really talk a lot about is seeing changes. So seeing changes in behavior or changes in the fact that people's mood has changed. So, they're not really an angry person, but all of a sudden they're having outbursts, and they're not getting along with other people. I think with the burnout, like the cynical, the negative, the real change from who someone is, those are such big red flags of, I'm really worried about this person. They're, this is not like them. And so really opening up that conversation. And I think it was so well said. I think it was Brent who said it, or it might've been Chad, around, we need to give airtime to the ability to have these conversations because people want to have them. Mm-hmm. They really do. And as soon as you open it up so that they can, they really rise to the occasion, and they'll share. Now, not everyone. And the more people share, you've got your influencers too. That's always important. Your influencers are going to have everybody else saying, oh yeah, me too. So, that's important too, that they're kind of opening the door to other people feeling like, oh, this is safe. I mean, it's all about safety. A lot of people are afraid that they'll have negative consequences. They'll be judged. They won't, people, I get it. Like, I'm sure in construction, I've never been in construction, but it's sort of like in any other business where you as a team rely on the strength, the focus, the safety, all the issues. And if somebody's like, I'm depressed, it's going to be hard not to look at that person and think, do I want to work with this person in an area where safety is an issue? Like, you have to work through those issues so that people understand it's better if someone discloses they're having an issue there so they get some help than they mask it and hide it, where there could be some really big safety concerns.
100%. That's you're not in the industry, but you just nailed a major concern. Is there anybody in the room that is from the industry that has experienced either a success case in what we were just talking about, or is struggling with what we're talking
about? So at the company I was at prior, we kind of went through a massive growth spurt, and we tripled in size and revenue, right? Building buildings all around and doing design as well. And I think the problem that we faced was, for the first few years, we had people in leadership positions speaking very like esoterically about getting along and emotional intelligence, but there was a kind of a massive lack of investment in middle management. So the people that are actually with the people who are boots on the ground on a job site or who are doing design. And it doesn't matter what some leader says who's like effectively sitting in their ivory tower, perspective wise, even if they're not. What matters is like the person who's like their day to day. And then being armed and knowing how to like, and being incentivized financially, not just go to this training class and, joke around and get nothing out of it. Like it's got to be a part of like some sort of incentive system. So I think one thing they did fairly well, not great, but better than I've seen a lot, is creating an incentive structure for middle management to kind of be emotionally intelligent and kind of boosting the people that really took it seriously and promoting those people, right? Because they end up being your influencers. So, I mean, regarding timeline, I agree. I don't think they're, it's kind of hard, but if you get people in middle management positions to all be unified, like nobody wants to be the odd person out, right? So if there's one person who's not acting, who's a bad actor, like they're going to come up with the system because everybody else is there. So I think like that worked pretty well. It wasn't perfect, but it definitely helped.
And incentivize the movement for cultural change to get to a critical mass of people that are going to spread the change. Yeah. Okay, I changed this as Brent and Darcy were speaking because they raised a couple of points that I find very relevant. And speaking of success and struggles, at my company, we both struggled and learned the hard way and ended up with a very successful program in place. So we teach an internal course that is primarily designed around mental health, but it is about performing in what is called VUCA environments, so volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environments, which is an acronym that was born from the military to characterize challenging environments where death, bodily harm, and mental trauma was likely. And construction is a VUCA environment. And so this table behind me is what we use internally. I feel like a weatherman here. Is what we use internally to balance recovery with stress. So just as Darcy said, that stress isn't necessarily a bad thing. In the methods that we've learned are effective, we don't focus on minimizing stress. We focus on recovery. So point number one, and funny enough, when Brent mentioned about diet and not putting those food trucks out there, man, you wouldn't believe how critical that is. It is so simple, but I'm going to step off to the side here and just take a look at here. So we have self-recovery methods and we have group recovery methods. And in the self-recovery method, eliminating the sugar cravings and staying hydrated is the most important thing. And Jonathan, you mentioned that you just had a burger and you're craving a burger, and you probably, if I asked you, answer this question right now. Do you find that after lunch or around the afternoon, you start getting sugar cravings and you might want a chocolate or something like that? And then maybe at the end of the week, that craving might increase?
I am admitting very little, but I would say that if you were to take and wash my clothes ever, you would pull candy wrappers out of pockets at miscellaneous points throughout the week. But if so, for sure, I don't think I'm as timed as you are, but yeah, man, I'm a complete sugar addict. I also am with a wife who's a complete health fanatic. So it's
I was
to
going to say,
hide the
like,
sugar.
Jonathan should amp it up though. Five Guys burgers are just.
So I'm gonna give you an explanation that may help. Now, I know you, Jonathan Marsh, as a construction dork, which tells me your brain is always on overdrive. You are always thinking about stuff. And so much so that you probably get in bed at night and the carnival starts, and you can't shut it off. So if I'm right, the brain uses glycogen as an energy source. And glycogen, when it comes in its hydrated form into your brain, is a 3-to-1 ratio of glycogen to water. So what I mean by that is for every molecule of glycogen that your brain uses, just like a computer uses a processor, you use or you burst, picture 3 molecules of water bursting. That's why you can sit there and not drink any water, do something intense or have an intense 2 hours of thinking, and you'll have to go to the bathroom, but you're drinking no water. It's because your brain is processing the glycogen and you're dehydrating yourself. But what happens is your brain is going, I need more glycogen. After nobody wakes up and craves a cake or chocolate first thing in the morning. They start to think, they start to process, their brain starts to work, and then the sugar craving starts. And the sugar craving is real. You are craving sugar. But back in the day when we were cavemen, we did not have cakes and candies and chocolate bars. We had berries and fruits. That's what your brain is asking your body for. So the sugar cravings are real, but you are not supposed to have these high sugar foods. So one thing that we do is, me personally, I set alarms twice a day for water, and I call them water and berry breaks. It's very simple. So I used to have chocolate all the time, which increases inflammation, which degrades your mental health and physical health over time and contributes to burnout. But since I've been doing I reached a point where I was suffering extreme physical and mental stress because I was burning the candle at both ends. I was using Adderall and amphetamines to just crush the day and go to training afterwards and get in the ring and train with wrestling and mixed martial arts. And I was really burning the candle at both ends. And I was craving sugar like a bastard. But when I learned this ratio of the 3-to-1 to glycogen molecules to water molecules, just switching to water and berry breaks changed everything for me. Such a simple change. So we bring that into practice here. And Darcy, when you were mentioning just having those open conversations, this group recovery here, we have methods where managers see the unseen. This is something that we find works really well. Some people find that if you come up and ask them they're okay, their instinctual reaction is to say, yeah, I'm fine. So we try to avoid asking that. Instead, we ask questions, probing questions that show there's a problem. For example, we'll say, hey, listen, do you feel in control of the day? I do this with a girl I work with, Monique, all the time. I'll just come up, hey, do you feel in control of the day? Do you feel that there's anything at risk? Take a look ahead of the week. Is there anything at risk that we need to throw resources on? And I'll do that regularly, three days to every 5 days. And when I start seeing her answers showing that there's a slow loss of control, I know that there's something else going on. And that's what will trigger the conversation. So we're not invading privacy. And a funny story behind that, back when I was a police officer, I was dealing with an emotionally disturbed person in EDP. And this is where that see the unseen came from. We were in the hospital helping him through a crisis. And I asked him if everything was okay. And he was like, Chad, you asking me to tell me what's going on in my head is the same as me walking into the bathroom and watching you taking a shit. It's that private to me. So sorry for the language. But that's how he felt about the concerns that he was going on in his head. So there was a big privacy issue. And that's where we kind of came up with the see the unseen. don't necessarily ask if everything's okay, come around and ask probing questions to get signals or signs that they're being overwhelmed, and then the real conversation can help. So anyways, listening to you guys talk, it spawned me or sparked me to think of these things that we do here at Plexxis.
We did that with the kids at the group home, just so you know, the asking how you feel, but actually meaning it. So when we, and this does not count for workplaces, and I am not a psychologist, none of that. But we did, like when we, especially when I ran work groups for everybody. So like if you were group home kids, you come out and work with me. And the first thing was we get everybody and say, how you feeling? And okay was not an answer we're looking for. Hungry was all right. Fatigued was all right. Anything but the normal, yeah, I'm fine.
So you push the conversation.
Huh? Yeah.
You push the conversation.
Yeah, and you can do it because they're younger kids. But I thought that was interesting. You brought it up.
Interesting.
So Chad, the other thing we found fascinating is we see correlations between the emotional profile and the physical profile.
Okay.
So
yes.
When we see anger, frustration, which is low impulse control and really high assertiveness, we always see liver issues. And see, Eastern medicine associates anger with liver, but Western medicine doesn't do that. But it shows up almost every time. So if we see that alpha kind of profile, we'll see biliary and liver issues. If we see a self-sacrifice, which is a tendency to put other people's needs ahead of your own, sugar handling, sugar cravings, carb cravings, that shows up every time.
It's interesting you say that. So nutrition is such a complex and personalized path to start taking. It almost, like, there's people that study nutrition for their life and they still get it wrong. So one of the things that we preach is keep nutrition simple, meaning avoid fast food and sugar. That's it. If you can avoid fast food and sugar, you are already in the top 80%. Just by doing that alone. So you don't have to be a nutrition expert. You literally just have to avoid fast food and sugar and stay hydrated. That's it. And so yeah, funny you mentioned that.
I don't, hold on. So here's the thing. Like we live in reality for all of us, right? Like I believe in some form of, like, I drink gin and tonics because they're fabulous for me. I think like there's and yeah, I also have burgers once in a while, for sure. Not once in a while, like they're delicious. But I think we have to be careful, at least my opinion, on saying it's like an all or nothing game, because like it's not. It's a good mix. You want to choose wisely. Like, yeah, you can have your, I think we eat well, but I think it's the root of the problem. The root of someone feeling bad isn't just food. It's the environment they're around, or like coping skills that someone hasn't led them to have. Like the other things are kind of, to me, fall into place a lot of times. Like you can't force and say, oh, if I start having like, a nutritional meal in the morning, I'm just going to be different. It's not, it's a part of it. I agree. I think it's absolutely a part of it. But I think personally, I think that you have to have that environment around you too.
Yes,
right.
I would agree with that to a certain point.
Sustainable.
Yeah, I would agree with that to a certain point. Now, when it comes, when you look at the fact that the brain literally controls everything that you do, it needs fuel. Refueling, the four things that we see as part of recovery is rest, relaxation, refuel, and reward. And on the refuel part, you can have a cheat day. The problem is most people, instead of a 80% healthy diet and 20% cheating, their comfort foods, the things they really enjoy, which is important. I do it myself. It's flipped around. It's 80% crap, 20% healthy. And the worst thing is that to eat well, you can get food delivery services that on a meal by meal basis is less expensive than fast food. but people will go to the comfort foods and the fast foods, partly out of addiction because they really do enjoy it, and that craving for sugar and not really understanding of why they're craving it does take control of them. But convenience is a huge factor in that. It's really easy to just grab a fast food meal, especially when you're craving it, than it is to have a disciplined approach to nutrition. So Darcy mentioned the comment that it's when we were talking about recovery time, that it is a lifestyle change. And that is so important here. When you make the decision to make a lifestyle change and incorporate better nutrition, or at least a balanced diet that is nutritious for 80% of your work week, or week in particular, when you do that for a certain period of time, you experience that lifestyle change. And what happens is, in every case, you will end up going back to your comfort foods and you'll feel really shitty right after you eat that big meal. That's when your body has made that lifestyle change, and you realize that actually one meal does have a negative impact on your body and your mental health. So when you have that realization, this is where I'll disagree with you. When you have that realization, and then take a step back and take a look at, if you live the lifestyle where 80% of your week is on poor nutrition and comfort foods and caving to those diets, the cumulative effect is disastrous, and clearly a contributing factor to burnout.
Oh yeah, I mean, I agree. I think we cook every night, but I think it's just it can feel like an impossibility for people if that's what we come out of the gate telling them to do.
Yep.
I'm not saying that it's not the right. I totally agree. You're 100% right. Because I go out and if I eat something totally terrible, I feel like not great, but it's just, maybe I should have said this differently. The tactics on getting, how about this? The tactics on getting people to that point.
It's tough.
Well, they matter, right? It's not just a light switch, which you're not saying either. And I think.
Oh, it's tough. No, it's tough.
So Chad, that's what we try to do, is just meet people wherever they are. And if we're talking to field people that maybe don't have as good a lifestyle choices, and especially around nutrition, we did food logs with this one guy. He's a 50-year-old superintendent. He's about 50 pounds overweight. My wife handled the food log stuff because she's a naturopath chiropractor, and she said she cried the first time she got his. This was back in fax days. He would fax his food logs, and she would say, okay, let's start with, you can eat all the sugar you want. You just have to eat it when you have a meal. That was the beginning part for him.
Uh-huh.
And then eventually he cut out almost all of his sugar and lost 50 pounds and really got, but you can't tell those guys. I mean, one of his snacks, mid-morning snacks, a 32-ounce Gatorade and a large bag of M&Ms.
Oh,
that was his snack. So he said, okay, if you have stuff like that, you got to have it with a full meal. So that's where we started with this guy. But he, even after he finished with us, he hired a nutritionist and really went the extra mile and got his life in order and got his food intake in order and lost his weight and feels great. So it's about meeting people where they are and doing simple things, just say, like, eat all the sugar you want, just at meals, don't eat it in between. That was a great starting point for him. He could handle that. It wasn't a big enough shift where he went, well, I can't never do that.
That's a great tactic. Because James, you're 100% right. It seems like a mountain you can't climb, because as James said, it doesn't even seem like it's practical. Like, we got to be real. This isn't going to happen. And I know that because it's tough. I can't tell you how many times that we've pushed, what's behind me, just avoid fast food. And every single day, without fail, every single day without fail, we have employees walking in with Burger King and Subway and stuff. So what James said is absolutely right. I never even thought about meeting people where they are. That's that sounds like that's a very effective tactic.
I have a question real quick, because we're talking about diet a lot, which is important.
Mhm.
But I was thinking, and I'm thinking about the 15 people, and I'm running through them in my head.
Mhm.
And I know at least 3 of them that I would say are at your level of healthiness, that eat perfectly, that run, that have good physical coping skills. So like I think like, while I agree with you about by the way, I intermittent fast too, and this is my break day.
Hey, awesome.
But if you don't think that food affects your attitude, fast a little bit. And if you're somebody who's hypoglycemic or like sugar fluctuates, you'll mellow out and you'll be like, wow, that's kind of untouchable when I'm fasting. But a lot of those people that I saw that did jump jobs, and my wife who works out like a beast, is, has the perfect food log, weight lifts not every day. I mean, she weight lifts like you're supposed to every other. But all these people are still going to have the option of burnout. They're doing good things, but there's still burnout happening, I believe. Now, do you guys, and I realize that from a functional standpoint, what you guys are giving as advice is perfect, because this is not stuff that's like nebulous or subjective in any way. It's like, objectively, we can change your diet. We will change your emotional health by doing it. But beyond that, because I really do have people that I know that are beyond that, what do you think similar steps are for emotional health? And Brent, you had said meditation, Darcy, or mindfulness, and some of those things. What on the mental side, again, pulling it away from the diet just for a second, what do you guys think are the top, the top couple things? If you could only stop fast food and sugar, what's the equivalent for the mental health side of it, in your opinions?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. So they're sort of in life and at work. But I think in life, it's, balance is really important for your mental health. And when I say balance, I mean balance in everything, right? So that's balance in the amount of work you're doing, in the amount of, time you spend online. The other really important thing is relationships. Relationships matter a lot. So keeping your mental health well means having social connectedness. And even if you're an introvert, you could sit quietly with a friend, a family member, a loved one. It's not about overt connection, but it's about connection, because love and relationship matters a lot. And there's a lot going on around looking at loneliness and isolation as major factors when it comes to concerns related to mental health. So I would say, balance in work life, and also just balance in taking time away, not overindulging in any one thing, trying to find the right balance for you. But social connectedness is really important. Love and relationships matter a lot. And, I think physical exercise and diet matter too, and that whole thing. And then, of course, sleep, because sleep is really important for your cognition, for your mind. And, you need to have a little fun too, and relaxation. And so, I mean, to me, that's sort of what I would think of as, no one's ever asked me that question. I think it's a really good question, actually. I'm going to think more about that long after this is over.
All right, now we need to know who asked the question and what the question was. Now that we got, what about 53 people in here?
Oh, gosh.
And the question was, why did Autodesk spend $1 billion on Innovize today?
That was the question. He's got it in one.
Right?
That was exactly what, and if you listen to her answer, she answered it correctly.
Because I just renewed my software.
Oh man, so many comments.
All right.
They can.
I didn't think Autodesk would outdo themselves with PlanGrid, but geez, hold my beer.
Yeah.